You ever wake up coffee in hand thinking you're about to have the most peaceful morning only to hear someone yelling across your yard at 7 a.m.? Your fence just cost you $500 a day. That's how I met my Monday Deborah, my neighbor and the self-appointed queen of our HOA, standing on the dewy grass, waving a yellow tape measure like she was fencing in the Olympics. Said my new cedar fence was a whole inch over her property line, which is wild because I'd built that thing 2 feet inside mine. 2 feet? You know what I mean? Logic's got nothing on a person who's drunk on power. She was threatening fines, lawsuits, public humiliation over a strip of grass barely big enough for a rabbit to stretch out on. Thing is, Deborah had no idea the real story wasn't in the grass or that dusty oak tree of hers, but somewhere way deeper, and what was buried there was about to end her little HOA reign. Ever been through this? Tell me where you're watching from, because I bet every neighborhood has a Deborah. That morning, the sun poured across my brand new fence, making it shine golden as I sat on my back porch sipping my first cup, thinking about how after 30 years in construction, I'd finally built something for myself, a real 6-foot privacy barrier. Not a palace, not a monument, just a little peace and quiet I could call mine. The thing was perfect. Measured it twice, just like my wife used to check her lipstick in the hall mirror. But then click snap. There's the sound of a tape measure being ripped out, metal on metal. I peek over and there she is, Deborah crouched down in her pressed khakis hair, in that battle bun she wears to every HOA meeting, face set like she's about to announce a verdict. She's been president 6 years now, and she surveys property disputes like a general scoping a battlefield. She calls out, "Wesley, we need to talk about this fence immediately." And I can tell by the way she's holding that tape, she thinks it's Exhibit A in court. I've measured this morning. There's a significant miscalculation on your part. This structure is encroaching 18 inches onto my property, and as HOA president, I simply cannot allow this violation to continue. I set my mug down buying a moment 18 inches. That'd put my fence smack in the middle of her flower beds, which is impossible because I had receipts, blueprints, permits, all of it showing my fence was a full 24 inches inside the line. Deborah, I'm not sure where you're measuring from, but my fence is exactly 2 feet from the property line. I've got the survey to prove it, I told her, trying to keep things civil. She laughed, a sharp, cold little sound that made me want to check my own pulse. Wesley, I've lived here over 20 years. I know my property. I don't need outdated paperwork to tell me what my eyes see. Then she points to her old oak tree standing gnarled and proud in the corner. That tree's always been my landmark. I've measured from that point dozens of times. Your fence is the violator. You ever try to reason with someone so sure of themselves, facts just bounce right off? That was Deborah, so convinced her tree was law you'd think it came with a deed. But trees aren't property markers, never have been. That's what iron pins and concrete monuments are for. But when someone's on a roll, no logic's gonna slow them down. So I played it cool. Would you be open to having a professional surveyor come check it out? Make it official? Her lips pressed tighter like I'd just accused her of cheating at Monopoly. There's no confusion on my part, Wesley. I know when someone's taking advantage. And she snaps that tape shut, already walking off. I'll be filing a complaint with the HOA today. You've got 30 days to remove this fence or you'll be fined $500 daily. I suggest you get a contractor quick. And off she stomped, checking over her shoulder every few steps, like she expected that fence to inch closer when she wasn't looking. I'd spent decades in construction, seen all kinds of ridiculous claims, but this was Olympic-level overreach. And as she vanished inside, I looked at that oak tree and just knew deep down this wasn't about wood or metal or grass. It was about someone needing to be right, even if she had to invent her own map. A few days later, a fat envelope showed up in my mailbox, official HOA letterhead. Heavy paper, enough legalese to make you think I'd build a missile silo instead of a fence. Dear Mr. Thornton, it read, your fence violates Article 3, Section 2, and so on. She laid out her case like a prosecutor in court on-site measurements. By HOA President Deborah Fairchild, indicate the fence extends beyond the property line as established by neighborhood landmarks. Yeah, that happened. She turned her tape measure and her tree into law with fines, threats, and promises of further legal action. I had to laugh. I dealt with more bureaucracy than most people see in 3 lifetimes, but never anything quite this absurd. Still, never ignore paperwork with a seal on top. So I called the number on the letter, got Martha, the HOA secretary, on the line. Martha, who exactly did this survey. She shuffled papers, sounded nervous. Mrs. Fairchild did the measuring herself. She's very thorough. That's one way to put it. Martha, doesn't the HOA require a licensed surveyor for these kinds of disputes? Click pause. Yes, it does. I'll send you the request forms for an official survey. I dug out my old file, the 1987 survey, with every angle, every iron pin noted. My fence was the most compliant thing on my lot, maybe in the entire neighborhood. As I sipped my coffee, I couldn't help thinking the real problem wasn't the fence or even the oak tree. It was the kind of blind confidence that confuses hunch for proof. I mean, some folks just need to feel right, even when they're dead wrong. Survey day arrived. Griffin Ashworth Jr. showed up with so much gear, you'd think he was mapping the moon. Trees make terrible property markers, he said. That's why we use iron pins and monuments. Took him about 5 minutes to find the southeast corner concrete marker iron pin, right where it should be. He measured 24 inches exactly. Fence was perfect. Right on cue, Deborah stormed over in her best business suit, HOA badge gleaming. Excuse me, I need to know what's happening on my property. Griffin kept it cool, ma'am. I'm the licensed land surveyor, just checking the boundary. She puffed up, pointing at her oak tree, still convinced it marked her line. Griffin shook his head. That tree is 18 inches inside your property, ma'am. You've been measuring from the wrong place. She went pale, sputtered about family tradition, but facts are facts. Tape measured, concrete, the numbers didn't lie. Her pride took a hit, but the twist. Suddenly my phone started blowing up. First it was Clifton next door. She's out here measuring my mailbox. Now said it's too close to the curb. Then Tom, 3 houses down. She's screaming about my driveway being 3 inches too wide. Before the week was out, half the neighborhood was under tape measure attack. Mailboxes, grass garden gnomes. Deborah had turned the whole HOA into her own private police force. By Wednesday, the Facebook group was on fire, memes about measuring tapes. Violation of the day posts, folks openly mocking her. The subdivision split, some scared to cross her, others flat out done with the drama. The HOA board's inbox overflowed with complaints. Martha called, said, "We've reached critical mass. Emergency meetings on." Then another surprise. Boyd, Deborah's husband, showed up with a clipboard and a sheepish look. Said Deborah sent him to remeasure the fence in case the ground shifted. He knew it was ridiculous, but sometimes you gotta pick your battles in a marriage, right? Poor guy admitted she wasn't sleeping up late, printing property codes, flashlight in the yard, measuring sprinkler spacing. Wasn't anger I felt then, just pity. She was chasing ghosts nobody else could see. But then came the real kicker. Griffin's dad, turns out he'd done the original 1987 survey. When I called, he said, "Oh, the Fairchilds." They've been fighting the same fence line since before Deborah got her first ruler, pulled out old maps, field notes, even a formal complaint the family filed against him with the county, trying to get his license pulled. The county cleared him. The math never lied. Over decades, every single survey came out the same. Thursday night, the whole neighborhood crowded into the community center for the HOA meeting. Deborah marched in with Boyd and a property consultant, the tension so thick you could have measured it. Janet Morrison, the board president, called us up. Deborah had her poster board, stacks of evidence, and the old oak tree front and center. She made her case, but you could see the cracks. Neighbors weren't buying it, not after all the tape measure crusades. Then my turn. I presented the survey report, original maps, even brought up Griffin's dad to explain the history, how every few years the Fairchilds tried to move the lines, how that oak tree was just a landscaping decision gone wild. The board reviewed the facts, checked the measurements, and finally Janet said, Mr. Thornton's fence is compliant. Mrs. Fairchild, professional surveys are not opinions, they're legal documents. The vote was unanimous. Deborah snapped, called it a conspiracy, said we were all against her. But you could see the fight had left her. The community breathed a sigh of relief. Folks actually clapped. The next morning, Martha called to say Deborah resigned as HOA president for personal reasons. The county showed up the next week to check out Deborah's own patio. Turned out she'd extended it into a utility easement without a permit. Poetic right, a for sale sign popped up in her yard before spring boy'd already gone. The new HOA rules require licensed surveys for every dispute, now no more tape measure law. New folks moved in, asked about the big oak tree. It's a pretty tree, I told them, but if you need the real line, call a surveyor. Sometimes it takes a village to face down a bully. Sometimes all it takes is a concrete pin and a little patience. My fence still stands right where it always belonged, proof that facts outlast tempers, and maybe, just maybe, neighborhoods can heal after even the wildest dramas. So let me ask you, where do you stand on HOA power trips and neighborhood justice? Ever run into a Deborah or been one yourself? Drop your story in the comments, because I bet there's more of us out here than folks like to admit. And hey, if you want more real-life plot twists, hit that subscribe button and share this with anyone who's ever gone to war over a fence.